Some might find it hard to believe that all the world would be against the Jews, since Israel seems to have many allies. Some have even believed that the Jews secretly control the world behind the scenes, manipulating media and world government. But God said of Israel under the curse of the law that there would be no might in their hand, and that Israel would be only oppressed and crushed always because of their disobedience. Can it be that in a mere half-century since the rebirth of Israel as a nation, that the Jews have overthrown all the ancient institutions of the world? Such allegations of a Jewish conspiracy were also propagated by Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party prior to the Holocaust. But this conspiracy for Israel's destruction is clearly mentioned in the Bible. The psalmist writes, "Keep not silence, O God, for lo, your enemies have taken crafty counsel against your people. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. They have consulted together with one consent." The psalmist then names the Arab nations of the ancient world, including the Philistines, from where we get the name Palestinian. Is it any wonder that the leader of the modern Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, has openly declared, quote, "Peace for us means the destruction of Israel and nothing else." But this desire is not confined to the Arabs, despite outward appearances. In 1994, John Loftus and Mark Ahrens, two secular authors, published their best-selling controversial work, The Secret War Against the Jews. Based upon 12 years of research, having interviewed more than 500 former officers of the intelligence community, the opening line of the introduction reads, quote, "The major powers of the world have repeatedly planned covert operations to bring about the partial or total destruction of Israel." Meanwhile, the publisher includes this review saying, quote, "The authors demonstrate that numerous Western countries, especially the United States and Great Britain, have conducted repeated and willful spying missions on Palestine and later Israel over many decades. While on the surface these two countries and others profess to be ardent allies of Israel, they work in fact through their intelligence services to betray Israel's secrets to the Arabs. Their motive, oil and multinational profits, which must be attained at any price."
Now, meanwhile, becoming a target, the oil, the $1 trillion worth of natural gas and so forth starts to make them an attractive target already. So,
do you see crude being found there as well as part of this?
I'm not an expert in that. I hear most of it's natural gas, or maybe there may be some.
Plenty of it.
Yeah, and how?
Plenty of it.
And how? Yeah.
No one knows for sure how this scenario will play out, other than one thing for sure: Jesus will return and will be victorious.
Yes, and the key point. Yeah, exactly.
An estimated 16 million lives were lost during World War I. But the conflict to come would make the Great War pale by comparison. While the numbers vary, it is now estimated that some 50 million lives were lost as a result of World War II, a birth pang which began with a similar declaration of peace for the sake of security. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Adolf Hitler in 1938 to draft the Munich Accord for the purpose of supposedly providing security for Czechoslovakia and to assure the peace of Europe. Chamberlain arrived back in London with this historic announcement.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
"I believe it is peace for our time," he said. "Go home and get a nice quiet sleep." So confident were the British, they posted signs saying, "Don't mind Hitler, take your holiday." 6 months later, Hitler violated the agreement when the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia. In less than a year, World War II was officially underway. Chamberlain's Declaration of Peace is today considered one of the greatest blunders of the 20th century. Can these events have been a foreshadowing of things to come? You be the judge as you consider this speech given by President George Bush Sr. when he spoke of the New World Order before the United States Congress in 1991.
A new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Some find it interesting that President Bush made this declaration on September the 11th, 1991, exactly 10 years prior to the destructive attack on America. But Bush had spoken of the New World Order a year before. Concerning the crisis in the Persian Gulf, he said, "Out of these troubled times, a new world order can emerge." These words he spoke on September the 11th, 1990, 11 years prior to America's tragedy. Can all these things be merely coincidence? And why would world government and a desire for peace and security bring about destruction? Jesus said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, give I unto you." Can it be that the world peace pursued by kings and rulers is somehow contrary to the peace of Christ? In 1885, Monsignor George Dillon wrote, "Communism is but a form of the illuminated masonry of Weishaupt." The Russian Revolution, like the revolution in France, is often portrayed as the noble struggle of just men desiring to overthrow an unjust monarchy. But as with Weishaupt and his inspired French revolt, a conspiracy against God is to be found at the very heart of it. In his book, Marx and Satan, author Richard Wurmbrand exposes the truth about the man most credited with the communist idea. Marx began his life as a professing Christian, even writing a poem titled "The Union of the Faithful with Christ" in favor of Christianity. But by the time he finished high school, somehow his heart had turned. In another poem he wrote, "I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules above." In a poem titled "Pale Maiden," Marx wrote, "Thus heaven I forfeited, I know it full well, my soul once true to God is chosen for hell." But Marx was not alone in his thoughts of damnation. He surrounded himself with like-minded fellows at the Internationale, a working man's association with a secret agenda. French historian E. Freiberg wrote, "The Internationale everywhere found support in Freemasonry," while author William T. Still writes that the Internationale can hardly be viewed as anything but Illuminized Masonry in a new disguise. Among Marx's comrades were men like Mikhail Bakunin, who wrote, "The evil one is the satanic revolt against divine authority. Satan, the eternal rebel, the first free thinker and the emancipator of worlds." Then there was Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who wrote, "Come, Satan, slandered by small and by kings. God is stupidity and cowardice. God is hypocrisy and falsehood. God is evil." Or Heinrich Heine, called the intimate friend of Marx, who wrote, "I called the devil and he came. His face with wonder I must scan. He is not ugly, he is not lame. He is a delightful, charming man." Wurmbrand writes that Marx and his comrades, while anti-God, were not atheists as present-day Marxists claim to be. That is, while they openly denounced and reviled God, they hated a God in whom they believed. When the revolution broke out in Paris in 1871, the Communard Florins declared, "Our enemy is God. Hatred of God is the beginning of wisdom." Marx greatly praised the Communards, who openly proclaimed this aim. Such was the thinking of the men whose influence would change the world through communism. As Nesta Webster wrote, the Internationale became simply an engine of warfare against civilization. Just as the Jacobin Club had openly executed the hidden plan of the Illuminati, the Internationale, holding within it the same terrible secrets, carried on the work of world revolution. This revolution would next enter into Russia to overthrow Tsar Nicholas II and his family, who were brutally murdered on July 17, 1918. As with the French Revolution, the powers that took over were far more bloodthirsty and cruel than any monarch in Russia's history. The two chief instruments, Lenin and Trotsky, inspired a civil war that cost 28 million Russian lives. When Joseph Stalin inherited Lenin's legacy, he would be called the most dictatorial and murderous tyrant the world had ever known. His own daughter said of him, quote, "A terrible demon had taken possession of my father's soul." His own daughter said of him, quote, "A terrible demon had taken possession of my father's soul."